beware the remake. It may just surpass the original. Hey freaks and friends, and welcome to the 17th entry of the John Carpenter review series. Today we're going to be taking a look at his remake of the 1960 film Village of the Damned. Came out in 1995. Village of the Damned stars Christopher Reeve, Linda Kozlowski, Kirstie Alley, Michael Pere, Mark Hamill, Thomas Dekker, and Lindsay Hown. The screenplay for Village of the Damned was written by David Himmelstein, and it was based on the 1960 film directed by Wolf Rilla, which itself was based off of the novel The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham. Village of the Damned tells the story of the small town of Midwich, where the entire town has fallen victim to a sort of blackout that causes everybody to fall into a comatose state. Resulting in this is the pregnancy of 10 different women, all of childbearing age. There are some unusual circumstances there in which one of them is a virgin, the other one has her husband working overseas in Japan, and this mysterious pregnancy definitely gains attention from the government, as it would. I mean, the whole phenomena definitely would, for that matter. And the children that are born of this mysterious pregnancy all come out with the silver hair, and there's something more to them that's not something you would find in a normal human being. They have characteristics that match ours, but there's something completely different. Something sinister. And one of the things that goes on throughout the film is sort of our characters, the adult cast in the film. They're trying to figure out what is going on with these kids, why they are the way that they are. That's where Kirstie Alley's character comes in, where she's this scientist lady from the government. And she's been working with these kids from the time they were born up until, I'd say they're probably about 10 years old. I forget exactly what age they're supposed to be. But she works with them, and she's noticing that there's all these weird little anomalies of sorts. All the while, Christopher Reeve, Superman himself, is trying to help teach these kids a little bit about humanity. And that's one thing that I think is really cool throughout the film, is you have one of the children, played by Thomas Dekker, David. The character that he plays is different from the rest because they all sort of have this hive mind and they're a 2x2 type of deal. One of the children died at birth, leaving him as sort of the odd one out. And throughout the film, he's shown to be a little bit different. He doesn't have the same sinister urges as all the other kids do, and he's the one who really understands humanity and ultimately is trying to understand what that's about.
There's no need for you to become emotional. I'm old enough to do things for myself. Why should I be experiencing emotion at this moment? What is the word you're thinking? What is empathy? So, if I have felt pain, I should be able to identify with others who feel pain.
I don't know, it's just a really interesting character, I think. You do have the sort of ringleader of the hive mind evil children, Mara, that's Christopher Reeve's daughter in this. She's a sadistic little shithead. Very intimidating.
Why do you hate us so much, Mara?
It isn't a matter of hate. It is a biological obligation. You are thinking of what happened to the others. Then our actions shouldn't surprise you. We have to survive no matter what the cost.
And Mara's the one who sort of takes charge in trying to carry out the agenda of these evil kids and sort of what their purpose is, which ultimately breaks down to taking over humanity and basically making humankind subservient to them and their will. And she seems to be sort of in the mindset of, you know what, your guys' fear of us is going to lead to you wanting to fight back, so we might as well just destroy you. The acting throughout the film, I think, is pretty good for the most part, aside from being a sort of a B movie. I think that everybody does a pretty good performance in here. Of course, Christopher Reeve is pretty great as the lead character. Again, sort of in his charge of trying to teach these kids a little bit about human decency and understanding humanity. Linda Kozlowski, I forget how you say her name. The girl from Crocodile Dundee, she's pretty good in here as David's mother. And she's one who kind of sees that he's not like the rest because of the sort of despairing that happened at the birth of all the kids there. Just sort of the emotion that she brings to her role is, I think, pretty endearing. Mark Hamill is pretty good in here. He doesn't really... I don't feel like he has a whole lot to do, but he's pretty interesting as sort of the reverend priest or whatever in the film. And it's sort of interesting him being sort of the spiritual guy when you consider that, you know, he's Luke frickin' Skywalker.
What the fuck?
Kirstie Alley, I think, is pretty cool in here. She's pretty smoking. I don't know, having her as sort of that government scientist is a pretty interesting role for her. She does sort of have that authoritative demeanor, which I think helps to make her character believable enough. And the kids are played pretty damn well too, specifically Mara and David, as they're the ones who were sort of given the bulk of the roles in that regard. Those two proved talented beyond their years at this point. And I don't know, it was just a really good performance by those two. I'd say the silliest acting performance in here is probably my boy George Buckflower, but you gotta love it. He's just a little unhinged, back to his, you know, booze hound self in here, so it's a lot of fun. There's just something about the whole evil kid sort of subgenre of horror too that I think is just naturally terrifying, and I think that's one thing that helps this film work. Again, it is a remake of an older film. In a lot of ways it's pretty similar. I do slightly prefer the way that the story's handled in this one, where in the original one you sort of get the blackout incident, the pregnancy, the kids are born, and they just turn out to be these evil little shits who need to be handled. Where in this one you get the blackout, the pregnancy, and you sort of get to know these characters as they're dealing with their whole plight here. And then you get the kids being born. You start, from the jump, you really start to get to know these characters. Where it just happens in a real quick 1, 2, 3, bam, 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 get to the action in the original one. This one, I think, takes a little more time to let us meet the characters early on. I think both of them handle that pretty well, but I gotta give the point to John Carpenter here. Is there a little bit of bias? Oh yeah, you bet there is. It's really haunting, too, the way that the kids end up wiping out some of the adult cast in here. I mean, you have them at a point where the adults are getting wise to what the kids have going on, where they know that they're evil, they know that they're different. There's something not right with their presence at all. I mean, the way they knock off Buckflower... Peter Jason. Mark Hamill. spoilers, among many others. It's just insane the way they do it, because it's when their eyes light up, they sort of take over the person who's their target, and that person is basically a slave to their will and wishes. It's absolutely fucking horrifying. I do like, though, the way that the characters are able to get around it. Kirstie Alley's the one who figures this out. Don't let them into your mind. Build a wall. Build a wall in your mind, keep them out, and you should be mostly okay. It's a very Pink Floydian type of thing, ain't it? I think the effects work in this one too is pretty interesting. The whole glow in the eyes. I don't know. There's something about these 90s effects. Just something about that 90s computer generated imagery. It's on a whole different level where it looks so bad, but it's so damn interesting now, looking back at it almost 30 years later. I mean, it looks pretty good in here, considering it's just a small little portion where the eyes light up. It's pretty damn freaky. Some people would argue that that effect works better in the original, where it's black and white, so it's like their eyes just turn white. Something about the red and that orangish yellow, you know, that I think works a little bit better in here. And I will admit, though, the close-up on the eyes, when I think the eye doctor scene, when you see the eye lighting up and getting all weird, that does look a little bit cheesy, but it's pretty damn cool. And I love the freaking hive mind thing going on too with the kids. It makes them a little more terrifying, where except for David, none of them can really think for themselves. You piss one off, you got the whole crew pissed off. It's almost like dealing with wasps or hornets, you know? There's something about that's just really freaky, and it's not just in this. Any time that the hive mind is used, it's always an interesting sort of device. The music in here too, by John Carpenter and Dave Davies, it is kind of that Carpenter-esque, but you're starting to feel these different influences. It's not like when he would work with Howarth and it was still very much Carpenter-y. This one, it does sort of explore a little bit outside of the Carpenterisms that you would get in the music. I think that's a pretty cool little thing to pick up on. As far as the cinematography by Gary Kibbe goes, I don't really have anything new to say about that. He's pretty par for the course at this point. He's pretty consistent in the way he makes the film look, so I didn't bring that up really for any reason except to say, hey, Gary Kibbe was the cinematographer here. It's also worth noting too that this is, I think, the last film that Christopher Reeve shot before he had his accident. So that was something pretty interesting, and in fact it was on the documentary on here where they're talking about he would ride that horse between takes, and it was just one of those things. It was just absolutely insane to think that, hey, there's this guy we saw walking around one day having a good old time, and in a few months' time he's not that same guy anymore. There was just something about that I don't know, adds this weird sort of dark element to the film. Not quite in a Poltergeist or The Omen, Exorcist kind of way, like cursed films, you know. But it definitely gives it a weird little extra flavor that's just kind of makes you chuckle in the most nervous kind of way. Now it's time for one of my favorite parts of the series, where we look at the frequent collaborators who've worked with John Carpenter on more than one occasion. Of course, looking behind the scenes, he's got Gary Kibbe working with him again, and he's sort of his go-to cinematographer at this point. Of course, his wife Sandy King has been producing the films alongside him here. But turning around to the on-screen bits, we have Mark Hamill in his second and final outing in a Carpenter film. Again, as stated before in Body Bags, he was in the Hooper segment, but it's still a Carpenter project, so got to point out Mark Hamill. This is another one with Peter Jason. I think he still has 2 more films to go at this point, and this would be the last time that George Buckflower would work with John Carpenter. So to see him go out in more ways than one here, just was a really fitting entry for him. He's sort of back to his sort of antics that he was locked into throughout his career, so kind of good for consistency there. And we do get the Carpenter cameo this time. He's going to be seen pretty early on into the movie. He's going to be the gentleman at the payphone. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's an old device in which we used to use to communicate. But he's seen at the payphone at a filling station early in the film. You can't miss him. If it's not the ponytail, it's the sneakers. You'll notice him. At the end of the day, I think that John Carpenter's Village of the Damned is a pretty serviceable and solid horror sci-fi remake. It's something that I don't think really offends the original film. It doesn't really do anything to disgrace it, I don't think. It's a pretty good entry into the creepy child subgenre of horror, which, as I said, is one that I'm finding to be a little bit more effective as I get older. And this is one that I think I would recommend to most people if they haven't seen it before. Whether you have seen the original and you just want to leave it at that, I still feel that this is one you should give a chance to. If you grew up in that era, late 80s, early 90s, and you somehow missed this one, I'd say it's definitely worth going back and looking at. At the end of the day, guys, I gotta give John Carpenter's Village of the Damned 3.5 celestially transmitted demon children out of 5. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching. Please be sure to play with the little icons down there. Hit that little bell and slash the icon, whatever, so that you can stay notified. Don't miss out on a single thing that I'm putting out. The wheels are back in motion here once again, so there is going to be some regularity once more. There's going to be some more updates to come, so you're going to want to stay tuned for all that. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.